on Monday, January 18th, and I will call our school board workshop to order at 5 o'clock. All right, so we will do a roll call. We have a couple people joining us virtually. So we'll go alphabetical. Mr. Bryant is not here tonight. Ms. Buck?
Here.
Mr. Dirks?
Here.
Ms. Rowe? Here. Ms. Tower?
Here.
Ms. Tiff? Here. And Chair is here. All right. So we will start with our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and I will read our mission. The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens. So for our workshop, we have not changed the agenda. So we will go through that as written. So do we need a motion to approve it still, even though we can't change it? Okay. All right, so we will begin with finance training, and I will turn it over to you, Jackie.
All right, thank you everyone for welcoming me. I thought, and I spoke with Superintendent Anderson on this, since we are going to be going into a lot of financial discussions in the next coming months, we kind of get everyone back up to speed on where we are at financially and some history things and some terminology as we go into a lot of school finance discussions in April or February, March, April. So I'm going to try to share a couple videos that Mashbo produced that give, I think, a pretty good summary on school finance in general. If they don't work, the links are in your packet, but I'm hoping you, sharing them on the public computer here, the sound will come through. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. The other one is on the special ed cross subsidy, but I didn't go into more detail on that for Red Wing. So if you ever get a chance and want to know more about what special ed cross subsidy is, there's the second video there. And I'm going to figure out how to stop presenting on this screen. All right, I'm going to switch over to my laptop now. Yes?
1 second. Ms. Buck?
Was I supposed to hear sound with that or no?
So the sound didn't come through?
No. I was sitting there waiting and I just didn't even pay attention because I was waiting for sound. So I didn't understand any of that. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't come through to me either, but I just kind of read the words and then I thought I'll just go back to it when I need to.
Yes, yes, there's links in my presentation if you want to go back and listen with the sound. It is very high level, but it does give a good baseline at budgeting challenges school districts face. All right. All right, as I said before, I'm going to cover the topics kind of looking at it in a historical picture, just to kind of give us a baseline as we go into more financial discussions in the coming months, enrollment history and projections, and then financial history and looking forward, what kind of challenges we're facing in the upcoming years. So some common abbreviations there. So if I talk in an abbreviation, please let me know. I try not to, but it is just part of my daily vernacular, and I sometimes fall into it without even realizing it. But there is a slide there you can fall back on that defines some of those common abbreviations. There's the links to the 2 videos if you need to look back at them again. If the links aren't working, they are on the MASBO website, and I will see if maybe Jill Rivard can link them to our finance website as well. So some enrollment history here. This is an enrollment history looking back to 2007 for Red Wing Public Schools. The gray bars are total district enrollment. You can see that it's kind of been gradually stepping its way down. The green line is our free and reduced lunch status, which, as you can see, last year took a big dip downward to below 30%, mostly because lunch last year was free, and we had a very hard time getting those applications in as well. The blue line is something MDE didn't start tracking until 2014. It is students with a disability, SWD, students, so it's students, special education students for Red Wing. And then the gray bar is ELL or LEP, so that is students who are learning English as a second language, so English language learner students. While the gray bars are using the left sidebar, the lines are using the right sidebar with the percentages. So you can, like, for example, economic status dipped just below 30%. Last year it was around 27% of our students were on free and reduced, qualified for free and reduced lunch. The next slide is our net open enrollment. And when I mean net, this means the number of kids we have open enrolling out, less the number of kids we have open enrolling in. So you can see that has varied widely every year, and for the 2020 school year did grow. We don't have 2021 data yet. So this was the school year we went into COVID. So the 1920 school year is the last one on there. And open enrollment ebbs and flows for a number of reasons. Sometimes students are going full-time PSEO at a college that is not Southeast Tech. And sometimes it's, they live mileage-wise closer to another high school. There are many reasons that students open enroll out and also open enroll in. We have a number of students who open enroll into Red Wing as well. The next slide here is our race and ethnicity. You can see we are becoming a more diverse school district as the years go on. This does include last year's school data. The purple is students who identify as white. Pink is 2 or more ethnicities. Green is Hispanic. Orange is Black. The light blue is Asian, and the dark blue is American Indian. So as I go into enrollment projections, this is what we're projecting going forward for our enrollment. It does include a slight bit of history as well, not going back quite as far. The dark purple here is historically where we've been the last, since 2015-16. You can see we are trending downward. 21-22 is what we are projecting for this school year for K-12 enrollment. And then the pink is projected enrollment going forward. We are projecting to continue to go down about 30 to 50 students a year. Some of that is our kindergarten enrollment, just the number of, and I believe that's the next slide, is our anticipated kindergarten enrollment based on births in the zip code 55066. So traditionally, if a child is born with an address in 55066, 5 years later, about 94 to 95% of them end up in our kindergarten class. So that's how we track that. So there are less kids being born with that zip code. So our kindergarten enrollment projections are trending downward.
Is there any way to track what we make? Housing has always been an issue for Red Wing and getting the town to grow. And there's been a considerable amount of new housing built in Red Wing in the last couple of years. Is there any way to track how many of them might be moving into the community that might have school-age children? I mean, it might be mainly seniors coming. I don't know.
We could look. I could maybe have our MARS coordinators look at addresses and see how many students we're bringing in with the new addresses.
I don't know. It's just a thought that to see if our projections are still accurate. We've been using the same thing all along, which has been very accurate, but with all the new housing built, I don't know how many units have been built in the last couple of years, but it's got to be, I'm sure, at least 300 units built in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
maybe a lot more than that. And I have no idea of what's coming into those facilities. There might be people vacating houses that are seniors going into these, and then the old address too. But I always try to be optimistic, I guess, if I can. Enrollment.
I'll have Debbie and Melinda kind of brainstorm on that and see what we can figure out. The easiest thing I could say is if in the new complexes, students who come in with the address, but tracking it backward to a sold house would be a little more difficult.
Sarah at CISO might be another source.
Yeah, she could see what students were transporting from those areas.
She'd have all the maps.
To pinpoint.
Who was where.
At what point do we compare the preschool enrollment? Because of course we would know Cobble, but that's not the only preschool. So is there a correlation? Do you see a correlation between that and what our kindergarten numbers end up being? You know, to Arlen's point, if they're moving in after birth, but before kindergarten. Right. You know.
We can't track it in community preschools, unfortunately. So we'd only know that for Cobble moving up.
Okay.
Jackie, what is your kindergarten projection for next year?
I don't know the exact number. It's right around 170. I want to say 171 or 172.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. The other interesting piece I found as I was looking back at data from last year, and looks a little inflated just because of how the graph looks, but when we lost 150 students going into last school year, Red Wing also lost 86 resident students. So when we're counting resident students, it counts not only it's students that live in Red Wing regardless of where they attend. So that means families with 86 kids moved out of Red Wing for some reason or another. So that is significant as well. It's not, we lost 150 students to open enrollment. 86 of those students physically moved out of Red Wing, whether it was for job or housing or something else, we're not sure.
What about homeschooling?
Homeschooling, if they are registering as a homeschool, they would be counted in our resident student numbers. Yep.
That'd be the net difference, you know, comparing how many moved in versus how many
They moved out, correct. And that, based on the big dip, is also projecting to continue to decline as well. So any questions on enrollment before I move into finance? All right. So looking at this, and it's probably teeny tiny for those of you watching on the stream, I am sorry about that. This is our aggregate fund balance for the general fund. As you can see, the gray bar is the biggest area. That is our unassigned general fund. That is what is typically used to measure the health of a school district, is where that unassigned general fund is. The rest are the restricted reserves. Like the presentation said, we get our funding sometimes in dedicated buckets. So these are dedicated buckets for specific purposes that cannot be spent on other things, like long-term facility maintenance is the bright blue there at the bottom. The kind of yellowy green color is operating capital, because those funds can only be spent on things considered operating capital by state statute. Most of these restricted reserves have a state statute tied to them, listing what can be spent in those areas. As much as possible, we try to spend these restricted funds down first, as our fund balance policy states, but sometimes there just aren't enough expenditures to put into those categories, giving us a larger unassigned general fund, which has more flexibility, which can be spent then on anything within the public purpose of a school district. That gives the board the most flexibility to designate, and so that is where we would like to have the majority of our reserve. The next couple slides just there's a lot of conversations about what is an appropriate fund balance. This is the unassigned fund balance for districts in our area. You can see Red Wing is, as a percentage of expenditures, which is the orange bar graph, we are about in line with Lake City and Zumbrota, Mazeppa, while Cannon Falls, Goodhue, and Kenny-Wanamingo are on either end of that. That's it, a minute. And then the following is the same kind of graph, but showing the big 9 school districts. Again, Red Wing's in the middle, but this does include only up through 2020 UFARS data. It has not been updated for 2021 UFARS data. All right, our current budget, this is the budget. I think it looks a little different in your packet. I lost my file, so I had to recreate it. But this is what was published. This is our adopted budget for this school year by fund, showing our fund balance by major and minor fund. Couple of graphs on our current year budget compared to our prior year budget. For revenue, you can see the majority of our revenue comes from the state of Minnesota, a very tiny sliver from the federal government, and the other large section is property taxes, and the red local would be things like interest, student fees, and things like that. Expenditure-wise, our expenses for both the prior year final and the current year budget, the majority is on salaries, which is the big magenta on the right side of both of these, and then staff benefits, which is the lighter pink. These make up around 70% of our budget. So when we're talking about budget reductions, it is very hard to make significant budget reductions when we're reserving ourselves to things like general supplies and capital expenditures because they make up such a small part of our budget.
What counts as purchased services?
So purchase services could be anything from a consultant to repairs. So bringing in someone to repair something. It is also staff travel, mileage, bus transportation, because we contract for that.
How about teachers on call?
Teachers on call would be a contracted service within that. Phone service, insurance, utilities. And then my last slide here is just some things as we look. I am going to be working on the projections for 2022, 23. That sounds really weird to say right now. It seems so far in the future. Later this week, but some things, when we were looking at this a year ago, we thought we'd get some students back from the students we lost due to COVID. We have not made any enrollment gains. If anything, we are still slowly falling down. The other thing, Red Cottage is pursuing becoming a charter school, which could draw more enrollment away from us. And enrollment is tied to a lot of our funding sources. So the questions are, how do we attract students to Red Wing? How do we attract families to Red Wing and to Red Wing Public Schools? Will we see an increase in enrollment once COVID is in the rearview mirror? We still don't know that. So that's an assumption we'll have to make. And what assumptions do we make as we were making budget and staffing decisions for 22, 23? Holly, I think, yep.
Ms. Howard?
Thank you, Jackie. That was really good and really helpful. My one question I have about attracting students, do we have a way to figure out if year-round school would draw more students to Red Wing? Is there any place comparable within the southeastern Minnesota that does year-round school? I'm talking about like the 45-day on, 15 off schedule. Mm-hmm. Would that be something that in the future could it be a potential draw if we were to ever look at a calendar that way? And I'm just asking that like as an open-ended, we don't have to have the answers tonight question, but I'm thinking of how we do things different and right. How people here and how we can draw people in. And if that is something that, you know, families would consider a reason to stay in Red Wing or to come to Red Wing, or I don't know the financial benefits or the financial deficits. I was just throwing it out there for tonight.
Yeah, Rochester is one school district in the southeast that does have an option for year-round schooling. The whole district isn't that way, but at least there's the one elementary school. That would be one comparable. If we went district-wide to year-round, then we'd also risk the potential of losing kids to other school districts because they may want a 3-month summer vacation. So
I didn't hear you, Carson. You kind of muffled on the last. We'd miss what?
Yeah, if the whole district went to year-round schooling, we'd have the risk of losing kids or gaining kids, depending on what their parents want them to do. I will say though that the educational planning that we're going to be embarking on starting this spring does include one component for consideration anyway of year-round schooling and several other innovative possibilities. And so that will be discussed this spring or this summer, just to see how it could fall in the mix.
And could we have some financial outlooks, connected to that? projections or whatever, wherever we could find it?
Yeah, if we could find a comparable school
Yeah.
district before or after such a switch, that might give some information. I'm not sure if we'll be able to find that in a reliable way, but we can certainly inquire.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Deere?
Thank you. Jackie, in our enrollment category here, we've not realized any enrollment gains for 2021-20-22. Where does students from our district enrolled in Five Rivers Online fit into this?
Fit into into this mesh? They are still included as students in our funding counts. So when they add up students for funding, you have the students that are enrolled and are served in your school district, plus students who are considered tuition out. So they're tuitioned out to another school district. For us, the majority of those tuition out students attend GCED, but they might attend Intermediate 287 or a program down in Rochester. So it's students served plus tuition out students equals the students you get funding for. And that's what my projections include. So those students are included in there even though they aren't served in a Red Wing Public Schools building. Mm-hmm.
So that 100+ students at Five Rivers Online is considered in your current projections of enrollment here?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The one statistic that really startled me was the decrease in the number of residents.
Mm-hmm. It really surprised me too. That is something that's really hard to track until we get those final enrollment reports from the state, compiling all of their data. And yeah, that we had that significant of a decrease last year really surprised me.
Just 1 year.
In just 1 year.
6 of those kids.
Mm-hmm.
Did we just get that report? Like, I'm just trying to figure out what the...
It's not final yet, but the final will be in February, but the last one was in November, showed we lost 86.
Okay, so in February, we get the official data for the previous school year.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that'd be after all the appeals have gone through.
Okay. Ms. Buck?
Red Wing isn't very inclusive. I would know because I grew up here many generations. My girls can handle that high school, but if this district doesn't change before my son gets to high school, I will be pulling him from this district and I will drive him elsewhere because they will eat him alive up there. And then I will have to wonder if my son's gonna have mental health issues or become an addict like the rest of our people do. So I know from our standpoint that we're not inclusive.
Nikki, I'm glad or Ms. Buck, I'm glad you brought that up because, first we do have a community issue if we're losing that many kids, who reside here. But then we also have to put the best product on the table, and that includes an inclusive environment. It includes high quality teaching and learning. And that's the way we can have our kids or their parents choose to attend Red Wing Public Schools, E12. So obviously that's an important consideration as well.
All right, to go on. So like I said earlier, declining enrollment equals less revenue to fund our general operations. Both the referendum and levy revenues and state aids are based on our enrollment. Our current operating referendum, which was voter approved in 2018, will expire at the end of calendar year 2023, or its revenue for school year 23-24. So we're coming up on that very quickly. That'll be one of the conversations we have this spring. And then with free meals again for this school year, the district is again seeing a decrease, although I did just check on the compensatory revenue report issued by the state earlier this week. We're about level with last year, but we are down significantly from historical on families filling out the application for educational benefits. The decrease in this funding goes not only for food service, which this year all the meals are free, but also helps us fund programs under the basic skills revenue, which are for English language learners, students who need extra help. More specifically, in our buildings, that's how we fund our general education paraprofessionals, our school counselors, our school nurses, all of that support staff. And it also drives our Title I revenue from the federal government.
Are we able to incentivize that at all? Like, I know that there was a concerted effort to reach out to people, but if getting free or reduced meals is not a thing that people get for completing that, are we able to incentivize it any other way, like legally and or?
Legally, we can't like say, hey, fill out your form and here's $20. But we try to promote things like if we have that application on file, you could have waived fees for athletics and activity participation. You could maybe have reduced rates for community ed classes. There's a free pool pass for the summer that kids who have that application on file can access. We've tried to promote things like that as much as we can.
Has that helped?
It's hard to say what the driver is.
Ms. Beth?
I was gonna say that within our APAC, American Indian Parent Committee, we have problems also getting new students to fill out the American Indian want to receive the funding and stuff like that. But Phil has been really good at reaching out to all of the families and actually showing up to their doors and helping them. I know that when I worked in our enrollment office for Prairie Island many moons ago, I was able to help because it's government forms, and naturally a lot with ethnic people, it's just, that's that trauma that's just kind of designed to trick us and things like that. So a lot of Indigenous people do not like to fill out government forms at all. And so it's just easier for them if I was able to help them fill out their enrollment form. Is that even an option for us to have a liaison type of that could go helping families make sure they know which forms they have to fill out? Just like somebody they can go to.
Yeah, I know that 2 years ago during the first part of COVID, we had a team of school employees that called all parents in the district. They didn't know who had qualified for free reduced lunch meals in the past, so we called everyone. And that really helped increase the number. The other possibility would be to have people like Phil White who could work with families, and when they fill out the Title VI application, perhaps he could also explain the free reduced lunch application. So that might help with some increases there. During the Hispanic Welcome Back to School session in August every year, I know they go over that as well. So those are some examples of that, but what I just described reaches about 10% of our student population, and so we need to find another way that we can enhance that. And so we'll need to do some thinking there.
Any additional questions for me tonight?
Could you stay for the next topic as well?
I will stay.
All right, thank you. We will move on to legislative platforms.
So we discussed the possibility of at least discussing or reviewing some of the platforms that different educational organizations publish every year. So I did include 3 of the most common ones, and that includes the Minnesota Association of School Administrators, or MASA, the Minnesota Association of Special Educators, or MASE, And then I think I added the Minnesota School Board Association, or MSBA legislative platforms. Thankfully, the leaders of those organizations, as well as several others, did meet to discuss the possible prioritization of funding requests. And so I received a letter on Friday from the director of the MASA, and so I posted it, I think, yesterday. And so it's essentially a letter that kind of prioritizes what the leaders of those organizations believe. And I think they made two good choices. The top choice, or the top two choices, include an attempt to index the general funding formula to inflation. The second one would be to eliminate or reduce the cross-subsidy in special education costs. And so I think it might be worthwhile just to briefly go over each of those components, because those will be highlighted by the educational associations when the legislature convenes. So the first one has to do with indexing the general formula to inflation. And in a typical year, I think this would be very challenging, if not impossible, to attempt. You know, maybe there's a chance because Minnesota has a $7.7 billion surplus. But when you index something to inflation, there's a huge risk for the state in terms of if there's 6% inflation, then you know that kind of formula could increase the state funding of education by 6%. You know, is that realistic or not? I think that's one issue that would have to be addressed. Another reason that this may have been highlighted by the education associations is just a reminder that the general education formula has not kept up with the rate of inflation over the last 20 years. Not even close. So, Ms. Pbis, I don't know if you have numbers as far as comparing, you know, the changes in inflation or, you know,
I don't have anything recent. The last I had was from Tom Melcher, you know, 4 or 5 years ago now. But I mean, it was.
Yeah, there's a significant difference, and I'm sorry for putting you on the
Yeah,
spot.
yeah, there is a significant difference. You can see specifically in the years where the state was having its budget shortfalls. So 2009, 10, 11, maybe even into 12, where that dropped significantly as the state tried to cash flow its budget on school districts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a significant change that happened in the early 2000s when it's often called the second Minnesota miracle for funding education. And in the late 90s and before, the local tax levy was significantly higher, paid a higher percentage of the total bill for education. But then in the early 2000s, there was a significant buy down of that local levy, which means that the state took on a much larger percentage of those costs, and the local levy went down significantly. The problem, and by the way, that's a good thing because it reduced property taxes for our farmers and homeowners, for businesses, the whole work. So that's a good thing. The negative, though, is that state education funding was more stable in the 1990s when it relied on local tax levies. It's not as stable now because it often follows the pattern of the state budget. And so sometimes we have good years and sometimes we don't. And so that's what is reflected with state aid increases and why it's lagging behind inflation. I assume that the difference is probably, you know, if we followed the same rate of inflation, we'd probably have $1.5 million or $2 million more each year, which would mean that we'd have, you know, less need to pursue operating levy referendum. So I think the education associations want to make that point at the legislature. I don't know if it would go anywhere, but I think they want to stress that point. Would you mind kind of going over the cross subsidy? Maybe first starting to explain
what the cross subsidy, yep,
and how much it means for Red Wing.
So cross subsidy is the amount of special education expenditures that are unfunded. So originally, I'm going to get this backward. The federal government said they would fund 40% of special education expenditures, and the state said they would pick up 60% of special education expenditures. Now the state has tried to keep up with the 60%. We're more around 45 to 50%, sometimes the high 50% depending on the year. And the federal government has not even come close to funding 40%. I mean, we're talking 20% on a good year. So that difference between what the state and federal government is giving us and our special education expenditures in a given year, which we have to spend, is the cross subsidy. For Red Wing, our cross subsidy or that unfunded expense has hovered around $3 million. I mean, some years it's 2.9, some years it's 3.1, but we've been hovering kind of right around that $3 million mark for a number of years. So that means out of our general education aid, which we get for all students, $3 million has to come off the top of that to fund what we're losing in what special education aid is not covering. Now you might say, well, why don't we just cut special education expenditures? There's something called maintenance of effort, which means we need to spend at least as much on special education expenditures as we did the year before. If we don't do that, that difference then will be recouped in general education aid. So if we spent $6 million, I'm just going to go on some round numbers, $6 million on special education aid in one year, and the next year we only spent 5.9. Eventually the state would recoup $100,000 from us. It might take a year or two to get through the process, but they would recoup that $100,000 from us.
So the goal for state funding and for federal funding would be to eliminate that cross subsidy. So the federal government would follow through with the promise, and the state, government can help us with some of those costs. Mm-hmm. And like as Pbis said, the special education costs depend on the students we serve and the staff that support those students, and that will stay constant. We will provide those services, and so the issue with cross subsidy is just reimbursing schools for those extra expenses because of that. So spending on special education services is the right thing to do. We want to do it, and we will do it. But at the same time, the state and federal governments need to recognize that and help us on the funding side. So that's the goal of the resolution that we passed, I think, earlier this month, in December, as far as notifying the federal government that we're in support of eliminating that cross subsidy, just like so many other Minnesota schools. But we also want to push at the legislative session here this spring. One final reminder, kind of a talking point, is that we're going to provide the special education services, so we will provide that. The cross subsidy helps everyone in the district because it will go into the general fund that we can use on programs and services that benefit everyone.
Ms. Howard?
Okay, so for our YouTube and listening viewers, when we talk about the cross subsidy and we talk about the lack of funding going where it needs to go, where should they pay attention in the legislature when votes are happening? What bills are those attached to?
In the resolution that we approved recently, there were some bills at the federal level that were identified. I don't know what the bills will be at the state level. That'll start coming out, I'm sure, within the next few weeks, if they haven't already done so, but I don't know the actual names of the bills. I'm sure there'll be a flurry of different bills that come out, and then we'll have to analyze those. We do get updates from the School Board Association, and so at some point, if we learn where those funding requests are being presented, and it's to the level where they're talking about in the committees or perhaps the whole legislature, Ms. Paradis can certainly identify those and then share it out with us. So that'd be, our two. And I'll tell you what, it does make a difference, contacting local representatives about these issues, especially when it's kind of identified in specific bills.
Because it's tied into, it's tied into the inequity of funding. So people should be educated around that. And I think this is a great place to let people know what those bills are and how our constituents need to support them and who is representing us.
Ms. Rowe?
In the past, we've met with our legislators. Is there any talk on being able to meet with them to talk with them about what our priorities are? Is that on the agenda for upcoming?
It isn't on the agenda yet for a workshop, but we could certainly do so. Perhaps Ms. Austin North and Mr. Geertz and I can talk about that and then bring it up for consideration. It's going to depend on their schedules and how it works with our workshop schedule, but the more contact we have, the better.
In the past, we usually have a special meeting that fits their schedule. So we may not be able to organize it to necessarily a workshop date.
Right.
If, depending on their schedule, what they're willing to do.
Well, I do think it's important to have a relationship with our legislators, and that's one way to at least be together and talk about shared priorities and goals and vision.
Yeah, the Southeast Service Co-op out of Rochester, we're a member of that, has traditionally held a legislator get-together so that representatives from schools throughout the region can meet with the legislators at the same time. And so that might also be another avenue so that, because they're busy people who are attending a lot of meetings, and sometimes there's more power if we're all together at the same time. I'll have to check to see if that is scheduled for this year. I know that they temporarily did not hold them, because of COVID. So I can check into that and then let you know.
Ms. Buck?
I have been in contact with Barb Haley and her crew. She said that her secretary said that they were pretty busy with meetings until December 3rd. She said she'd reach back out, but I haven't heard anything since. So maybe I'll circle back with her with an email to see if we can have a meeting with Barb Haley. Just because we on Prairie Island have such a great relationship with her. I've already had communication with her prior to getting on school board. So I'll just circle back with that again too tomorrow.
Are you back in the queue?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'll take my hand down.
All right. Do you have more for the legislative platforms?
Not today, but I did receive an email message once again from MASA, the superintendent's group, with their opinion about the constitutional amendment that will be discussed and possibly voted on. And so I think that's something we could discuss at our next workshop session.
Yes.
I assume that this is including our platforms on MSBA and stuff, is that right? What we're in the discussion on right now? I'm trying to understand on the MSBA platform, I know it's been out there a few other times, fully equalized property tax levies and indexed to inflation. State money is not kept up with inflation, creating a funding gap of $598 per student. 70% of Minnesota schools are dependent on referendum revenue to make up this gap, creating an inequity in funding across the state. Equalization levels the playing field. It sounds great when you read it, but if I'm reading this right, the implications to us might be a negative for funding for our district, because if we're equalizing this, if I'm reading that right, does that mean our operating referendum money would go to be used throughout the state and we wouldn't be getting the full effect of what we are now, because we still don't get 100% of it, we only get like 90-some% of it, I think it is, because of our size and the wealth, perceived wealth of the district, I guess I'll say, of taxing ability. So I'm wondering where, if I'm interpreting this right, and is that something that we as a district really want to support? Because it might have a negative effect on our finances. Yes,
You want to answer that, or you want me to?
I'll give it a shot. If I go away in left field, let me know. When they talk about equalization, they mean making it more equal across the districts. It would go kind of like we saw local optional revenue go a few years ago, where it's that one set levy amount that all districts have access to. When they're seeing unequal things, for example, we have an operating referendum of $1,650. Many of our neighbors either don't have one or have a very small one for various reasons. Maybe their budget doesn't need it to support it, or maybe they can't get it to pass through their voters. So that's what creates the funding inequities. And also property inequity. In a property wealthy district or a very large district, it is easier for a district to get a vote passed because a great increase could mean a very tiny increase in everyone's property taxes in a growing district. So think of your Minnetonkas, your suburban edge districts, Roseville, Apple Valley, Eagan, where their property tax wealth is growing very fast. So it is easier for them to get an operating levy passed because the impact to taxpayers is very small. When they talk about equalization, it is just taking that ability of the more property wealthy districts and giving some opportunity to those that are not as property wealthy. Sometimes it's in the form of something like local optional revenue, where a board can access it without having a voter having to go to the voters. And sometimes it's in the form of state aid, where the state will give them X amount of dollars to help backfill where their property, because they are not a property wealthy district. Mm-hmm.
So, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it has to do probably with the second one.
Yeah.
My guess, because we use the word equalization. So it would depend on where we are compared to other school districts in terms of property wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And so like Minnetonka, they're paying a lot less per $100,000 or per $500,000 home than we are, and so it's not equitable. We really have to look at the actual legislation and see the legislative runs as far as how it impacts Red Wing. My guess is that the higher equalization, the better for Red Wing, but it depends on the actual legislation.
Yeah, and right now we receive, because of Xcel Energy, and we're considered, at least in the state size, a very property wealthy district, we receive very little equalization aid.
But it says here fully equalized property tax levies.
There are some.
Levy is, referendum is a levy, so I think we just got to be very careful on them and get more clarity on this. I think it's going to be a negative economic situation if this was to go through to our district.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe yes, maybe no.
We'd have to look at the exact bill language.
The goal is I shouldn't say it this way, but take from the rich and give to the poor. And we're probably on the rich side because we have the larger levy. We probably have the higher property revenues and stuff. Prairie Island plant is valued in a different way as a utility versus a lot of other things. But I think it's going to have a negative effect on our district if this were to go through, and it all depends on what does. But I'm just saying there should be some caution on this, and I'm not sure if I can support this part of that stance by MSBA.
Yeah, and there's multiple platforms that are listed there. The collaborative group did not include that as a top priority, but there may or may not be bills that would move towards that.
All right.
And this row we have.
Oh, no.
Okay,
I was
sorry.
waiting at 30.
Okay.
Right, and of course, we will need to talk more about our levy and the process of renewing that. So we will keep moving on that shortly. Okay, anything else for this workshop related to the? All right. So
What we'll do is, we set it up so we have two separate meetings today. So we can adjourn this meeting and then we'll have a 5-minute pause for Lisa to kind of set up the next meeting, and then we can start the regular meeting.
do we need a motion to adjourn this meeting since it's done?
Thank you.
Okay.
Separate meeting.
Got it. All right, so I will adjourn this meeting at 5:57 and we will reconvene at, let's say, 6:05. Is that enough time for Lisa?
It is.
6:05 for the regular meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. 18th, and this is a regular school board meeting of the Red Wing Public Schools, and I will call the meeting to order at 6:06 p.m. All right, so first of all, we will do a roll call. We have some people attending virtually.
And I see how I'm not in.
Oh,
she is, okay.
there you go. Okay. All right, so I will go down our list. Mr. Bryant is not able to be here today. Ms. Buck?
Here.
Mr. Dierks?
Here.
Ms. Rowe? Here. Ms. Tower?
Here.
Ms. Tift? Here. And Chair is here. All right. So we did the Pledge of Allegiance at our workshop and also reiterated our mission statement. So next up is to approve our meeting agenda. Does anybody have anything that they want to add or change to the agenda?
We will delete the first business item, committee and liaison assignments, and then bring it back at the next meeting.
All right. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
How about a second instead?
Sure.
Second.
Okay.
Second. All right, so we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended by Ms. Tower, second by Ms. Rowe, and we will do a roll call vote because we have some people attending virtually. So, Ms. Buck.
Aye.
Dierks.
Aye.
Ms. Rowe.
Aye.
Ms. Tower.
Aye.
Ms. Tift. Aye. And Chair votes aye, so that is 6-0. All right. Myself a little. So I will draw your attention to our educational plan, which is always included in our board packets and is our direction for the district. Next up is public comment. So first I will read our guidelines for that. We expect that comments be limited to 3 minutes per person and that a representative be selected to speak on behalf of.
Madam Chair,
Oops, sorry.
we have recognition of the events first.
Oh, we do. I didn't have that in my sheet. I'm sorry. All right. So back to recognitions and upcoming events. So I have a recognition for the kindergarten class. Kindergarten students created coupons to do chores around the house and for friends and family members and were paid for their work and donated money to the food shelf. They raised $754.21 for the high school food shelf. So thank you to those kindergarten students. Very cool. Another thing, we have our high school musical coming up next Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and the students have been working hard on that. Ms. Howard.
Thank you. I would like to recognize our principals and our student support coordinators and our assistant principals for stepping in and teaching, sometimes full days in classrooms when there haven't been subs or when teachers are covering other classes for somebody covering a class. And I know other people have been helping out, but when you're trying to run a building and then you step in and teach a health class or, you know, social studies class, that's a big thing. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them. Thank you.
If I could add one commentary on the musical, it will be Sean Dowse's last musical here in Red Wing. So I forgot to ask him how many years he's served in that capacity, but it precedes me. And so he's always put on a great product when he was working at the Sheldon and now in his retirement. So we're going to miss him a lot.
All right, any other recognitions for upcoming events? All right, so now public comments, round 2. So again, the guidelines. We expect that comments be limited to 3 minutes per person and that a representative be selected to speak on behalf of a group of individuals attending the meeting for the same topic. School board members will listen to the public comments but may not discuss the topic at the meeting. The superintendent and/or school board chair may provide a response outlining steps the district has taken or will take to address the concerns. We expect that comments remain respectful and appropriate and not identify any current or former students, their families, or staff members by name. And we have one person here who has signed up for public comment, and we have one that was sent in prior to the meeting. So I will read the one that was sent in. So from Janie Farrer. I have 3 children currently in the school district. 6th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade, and a 2021 graduate. Please vote in favor of changing our quarantine recommendations to match the CDC's updated guidance from 10 days to 5 days. Please vote in opposition to the proposal for distance learning on Fridays starting this week. Please vote in favor of keeping honors and AP offerings in this district as updated in the program of studies so that all and every student can be supported. As we all recognize, distance learning is not successful for student engagement and instruction. With Friday being the last day of the semester, tonight's proposal is bad timing. This is moving too fast. Board members, please have our students' education as a priority. We need to continue every opportunity for in-person education for those families that have chosen it. Please consider asking for volunteers to help in elementary schools, as many of us are here to help. Finally, I do ask that you engage a group of parents to discuss the grade configurations for next year and the future. Thank you for your time and commitment to our schools, and I ask that you continue to find more ways to engage parents and the community in your decisions. Did you receive any other?
That's the only one I received.
All right, so then Kim Thompson. Let you come forward to the public comment computer. If you want to turn on the video portion of it, you can.
I'm good.
But you don't need to change anything with the
Okay.
sound.
All right. Good evening, pardon school board members and Superintendent Anderson. My name is Kim Thompson, and I'm an elementary teacher at Redmond Public Schools. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you regarding tonight's agenda packet. I will be addressing the proposed changes to the current learning plan. Unfortunately, I have not heard from any union members seeking out feedback from teaching staff or offering to represent teachers regarding these proposed changes to our current learning plan, which is why I'm sitting here before you tonight. I definitely understand the why to the changes. I am just not sure we have all of the information to make this decision. I chose to come here to ask a couple of questions to gain a better understanding in the data and the facts. The proposed plan to shorten the quarantine time, I stand in favor of. I stand in favor of it solely for the sanity and relief it may bring to our teaching staff. As you've heard before, we are tired. Shortening the quarantine time may allow some staff members not to have to quarantine teach, which is where they gather all the students' materials, make a pacing guide for those quarantined students to follow, send home assignments and post in their Google Classrooms, and do daily check-ins with the students. Even though I stand in support of this proposal, it is a really hard pill to swallow to know the risk staff will be expected to endure with a lesser quarantine time. The other proposal I have questions about is the high school going distance learning on Fridays. I understand this proposal, and I cannot tell you how much the administration has sacrificed and become creative to help us cover all of our unfilled positions, but I do have a couple of questions. The first one is, how many contracted substitutes does the high school have? Is it 2? Because that doesn't even cover our elementary buildings. Where is the data of staff absences for each day of the week? The Mondays, the Tuesdays, the Wednesdays, Thursdays. How do we know Friday is the best day to choose? Now, this may sound funny, but what this proposal sounds like at face value is basically it's saying that our teaching staff only gets sick or has sick kids or makes appointments or needs personal or health needs on Fridays. which by the daily staff absence emails I received is not true. So now let's look at the big picture. Have you considered other subs who are not the district paid subs, the hired contracted ones? Most of these people choose to enjoy a 3-day weekend. And that's part of the luxury of being a sub. You get to pick and choose your jobs. And some subs don't even want to sub at the elementary level. So equity is the final piece. I'll leave you with that. How do you make this equitable amongst all teaching staff? So what I'm hoping happens before a vote is made is that everyone has dug in or has the data and facts that can support this move for the high school to go distance learning on Fridays. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right. And we will be discussing, obviously, a lot of that, if you notice on the agenda. So next up is COVID-related topics. And Superintendent Anderson, I will let you go over the proposed changes here.
Thank you. And then Shonda Jorgensen is also available to answer questions as they arrive. And perhaps she could really take the lead on the learning plan part. As always, we have information about COVID-related topics. This sheet was updated twice because of the changing nature of COVID. The latest was just a few hours ago. And so we'll go over that part in particular when we talk about the learning plan. As always, we have COVID data that's included in the board packet. That sheet was updated today because we received the latest information from the county today, and it shows a rise again in COVID cases in the county. The vaccination and testing plan is the first item to be considered with this particular topic. As you know, policy 809, the vaccination and testing plan policy was approved just over a week ago to fulfill a federal mandate requiring vaccinations or weekly testing of our employees. The pertinent portion of the mandate was recently struck down by the Supreme Court. That was not particularly surprising, but the decision did come out late last week. The Minnesota School Board Association indicated that we do not technically need to revoke the policy because of verbiage in the purpose of the policy statement that essentially makes this null and void if it's struck down. However, the recommendation is to revoke the policy, just to be clear to employees that vaccinations and weekly testing will not be mandatory. So again, the recommendation is to revoke policy 809. Do you want to go over other aspects and then come back, or should we do it one by one?
Sure. So I'm looking for a motion to revoke policy 809. So moved. Okay. Do I have a second?
Nikki Buck.
All right, so there is a motion on the floor to revoke policy 809 made by Ms. Rowe, second by Ms. Buck. Is there any discussion? All right, then we will do a roll call vote beginning with Ms. Buck.
Aye.
Mr. Dirks?
Aye.
Ms. Rowe? Aye. Ms. Howard?
Aye.
Ms. Tiff? Aye. And chair votes aye, so that passes 6-0. Okay, next up, learning plan. Let's put it up.
If I could just briefly introduce that part and then turn it over to Shonda Jorgensen, who can really give details and answer questions. The COVID response team and I have been talking about potential changes to the learning plan for several weeks. And last week we came to the conclusion that we would like to change the learning plan to shorten staff isolation periods so that instead of a longer isolation period, it could be shorter if they have the appropriate testing. We did not feel comfortable shortening the student isolation period, and Sean Jorgensen can explain why here in just a minute. The second part has to do with student and staff quarantining requirements. And we came up with an initial suggestion not to quarantine elementary kids at all. And then today, after looking at county data and reviewing the feedback that we received from staff members, we believe that we should at least continue the quarantining of elementary kids if they're living in the same household as someone with COVID. But if we could pass it over to Ms. Jorgensen, she can kind of give more details and a broader understanding of what we're talking about.
Okay, so what we want to change is definitely the isolation and quarantine of staff and students. I want to go through the isolation and quarantine of the students first. We still want to keep students who are positive with COVID out for 10 days, the full 10 days. The reason being is in order to qualify for a shortened isolation, there are a few things that have to happen. First off, you have to be asymptomatic on day 5. A lot of people are not asymptomatic on day 5. And so I don't know how often this would be applicable to them. Also, when they come back on day 6 through 10, they are required to wear a well-fitted mask. And they have to wear it at all times around anyone within the school. So I'm kind of thinking of, we have an elementary kid who is back on day 6 through 10. They have no symptoms, but they're not wearing their mask correctly in class. And so they're being constantly reminded, you got to wear that mask. You got to wear that mask. It's not well fitting. Okay, who's in charge of getting them a well fitted mask? There's some logistics there. And I just see putting that burden on the classroom teacher and saying, okay, this particular teacher, you have a kid coming back on short isolation. They have to wear a well-fitted mask from this day to this day. Can you make sure that they do that? Also, when it comes to lunch, they are not allowed to take off their mask unless they're 6 feet or more from other people. And so how are we going to handle that in an elementary school setting where there's 30 kids in a class and they're all within 3 feet of each other eating lunch? Do we pull them from their room and put them in a separate room? This also opens up the issue of, okay, now they're going to be easily identifiable as people who are still technically positive with COVID. And how is that going to affect the social aspect? Are other kids going to catch on and start picking on them, that kind of thing? And so we're basically putting a red highlighter or a big yellow highlighter on them saying, hey, they're still technically positive. And so there's a lot of factors in there that we just don't have a way that we can make sure the rules are followed with every student. As far as quarantining, we would like to stop quarantining students who are E through 6. We already don't quarantine students in high school. We'd like to follow that with elementary. And if they were in school and there was a close contact at school, we won't quarantine them. We won't say you have to stay home for 7 days because of that contact. We would send out a letter to this class saying there is a positive in your classroom. Please monitor your child for symptoms until this date. But we would still like to, especially in the E through 6, quarantine students who have a positive within their household. We're seeing evidence that we're not getting a lot of classrooms where there's one positive after positive after positive in the classroom. We're seeing a lot of our positives coming from, oh, my brother has it at home. Now my mom has it. Oh, I have it. So if we can keep those, the families kind of isolated so they can kind of run their course within the family and not bring it into school, that's what we like to see. We obviously will let people know that they were close contact at school, but we'll tell them it's not required that you quarantine at this time. For staff, we would like to implement the shortened isolation period for them. Again, it would have to have been at least 5 days since they had the starter symptoms or tested positive. They have to be asymptomatic when they come to the building. They can't be coughing, sneezing, runny nose, anything like that. And that we're going to require that they wear an N95 mask from day 6 through 10 to make sure they are wearing a well-fitted mask, and that mask will be provided by the school. And then they also have to know that they have to wear their mask around everyone at all times. When they eat their lunch, they need to be alone or be at least 6 feet from people at that time. When I do talk to teachers who are positive, a lot of them say, oh, I always eat lunch alone. I always eat lunch alone. So I don't see really an issue with that.
And then as far as quarantining, again, we're not going to quarantine staff for a school contact, and we won't necessarily make them quarantine if they have a household member. It's going to be up to them. And that's to hopefully retain staff and keep staff in the building as long as possible. And we would like to see this change start on the 25th of January. We've gone up back and forth a lot. Well, is it too soon because of Omicron? You know, we're kind of in the middle of this big surge. Is it right to do it now? But it's hard to put, you know, the beginning of the semester is a very nice, clean number. If we say, well, let's make these changes when Omicron is over, who's going to tell us Omicron's over? What does it mean that Omicron's over? Do we have to come up with a number that says, well, when we dip below this many percentage of students or staff that are, you know, positive, then we can implement these changes. We felt that it was just kind of a nice even break with the semester. And that's what we'd like to see changed in the learning plan.
Okay, our request. Ms. Fitz? Thank you, Shonda, for the explanation there. I have a question about quarantining. In the packet that we were originally given, the quarantine guidelines would be the same for E through 12. But I just want to clarify that now you're saying that E through 6 would be quarantine would need to happen if someone in the household has tested positive. Okay, but then 7 through 12, it would remain the same basically as what it has been, that there would not be a need to quarantine.
Right.
Okay.
So if there's a family with high school students and elementary students and a guardian is positive, the elementary students will need to stay home and quarantine. But the high school students, like they have all year, are able to still come to school. They just need to make sure they monitor for symptoms, and if any symptoms pop up, they need to stay home and get tested. We also, as far as quarantining the students because of a household contact, it's not necessarily going to be the 14 or the 24 days that we originally had at the beginning of the year. We will short quarantine them based on the last day they had contact with that positive family member. So if we have someone that can go into a bedroom and they have their own bathroom and they can eat in there and kind of essentially isolate themselves away from the family, then we'll do a shortened quarantine with them, which is the 7 days if they test on day 5 or later. But we, you know, especially with younger children, that's just impossible. And so we'll just kind of have to take it case by case, with the longest quarantine being that 17-day quarantine, because the positive family member has the 10 days infectious period, and then we'll do a shortened quarantine after that. So worst case scenario would be 17. We've had people who say, oh no, we can't isolate within the household, and then contact us a few days later and say, okay, we figured it out. We sent dad to grandma's house or something like that. And so then we can start the shortened quarantine period from then. One other thing I want to add, I forgot, as far as tests that we will accept, right now it's really hard to get PCR tests, and they are days out. You take a test on Monday, you may not hear till Thursday or Friday what your results are. And so we are willing to also accept 2 negative antigen tests that were taken within 24 to 48 hours of each other. So you could take one antigen test and then 24 hours later take another one. And if you're both negative, we'll accept that as a negative result. I forgot to add that.
Thank you. I guess a lot of this sounds wonderful, but I'm a little concerned because it sounds like we're going to try to enforce mask things slightly different if somebody is having something different. Finding out if somebody's positive in a household member, and I'm really concerned, how do we determine all this with HIPAA laws the way they are, and are we really getting into a situation we shouldn't be?
We haven't had a problem up until now about, you know, we get emails all the time. I'm positive, I'm keeping my kids home, I'm getting them tested. Or, you know, we haven't had an issue with, not very much of an issue of people not disclosing kind of what's going on in the household. I think they understand that what's going on there is going to affect how school works for their children. I don't see an issue with that.
Ms. Rowe?
Shauna, is there tests available at school for families to utilize because they're very hard to come by in the community?
There are. We actually have a couple different kinds. We have the Vault PCR testing, which is the spit in the tube that you can do on site. And then we mail tests in every day. You can also take home a test and do it at your house and mail it home yourself. But we also have a stockpile of antigen tests that we got from the state. We were kind of holding on to those because we were going to use those for the testing of the employees, the weekly testing. But now that we don't have to do that, that's also an option that we can give out. And so we got a few. Sometimes a school, like today, the high school ran out of the on-site tests. And so then their option would be, okay, take a take-home test, and then we can kind of shift around products to get tests where they need to be. If someone wants to take it right now and we don't have one, we can run to another school and get it. It's just, we're ordering tests and they're kind of flying out the window. So we're trying to keep up. But with the antigen tests that we've received and that we will make available to everyone, Joni and I just tried them today. They're really easy. They're really slick, and they also give you a digital result. So it says that you are negative. It's not just a box you look at and say, yep, I'm negative. So that is going to really help with, people showing, okay, if they do the two antigens 24 hours apart, we'll get a result at 1 p.m. this day, and then the next result will be 1 p.m. tomorrow. The next day, they're both negative. You can come back to school that next day. So and we're working on getting that stock out.
What's the best way for a family to access those tests if they need one?
Talk to your school nurse. All the school nurses have this supply.
And I'm assuming that we're going to continually look at this because I did hear some hopeful news today that, maybe the surge is peaking now or will be getting better here in the next couple of weeks. I also want to make sure that our community realizes that while this Omicron is spreading like wildfire and a lot of people are sick, it doesn't last as long. It's not as severe, and it's a lot less deadly than other strains that we've seen. Out of the Kaiser research, which is a healthcare research out of California, today I just heard, you have a chance of 1 out of 15,000 to be struck by lightning, and you have a 1 out of 56,000 chance of dying from Omicron. Now, I don't say that to minimize it, but I also want to put it in perspective that we need to keep looking at what's happening in our communities, and obviously we don't want to spread this virus, but at the same time, at some point, we have to also realize that it may not ever go away, and how do we live with it? That's just my point.
Are there any other questions? So just to clarify, the changes that are made to are proposed in this learning plan are changes to quarantining for E12, no longer quarantining for close contacts in a classroom, and isolation period for staff. Is that?
And I would add, Anna, the accepting 2 negative antigen tests or 1 negative PCR test.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the changes to the learning plan, or I'll make that motion to approve the updated learning plan as presented.
And then that's with the addition of the quarantine for E through 6.
Yeah. Is there a second? Ms. Tower, are you raising your hand for a question or it's a second?
I was gonna make the motion, but I'll second the motion, and then I have a comment after we vote. Or should I make my comment now?
Yeah, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the updated learning plan as presented. The motion made by Ms. Tick, second by Ms. Tower. Now is there discussion?
I really want to thank the COVID team and Karsten for their diligence on taking in as much information as they can and then trying to parcel it out into what makes sense and what, we think we can live with and what we can track. And, Arlen, you said about the HIPAA stuff. I feel like this group has done such a phenomenal job up until now that I'm glad you brought it up, but I don't feel like that it's going to be a negative moving forward, just because I have such faith in what you've done so far. So I really want to say thank you, Shonda, and to the COVID team and to Karsten for just staying, vigilant around this and trying to keep everybody as protected and in school as much as we can.
So, Ms. Rowe, you don't have your hand currently raised, yeah? No? Okay, and you're good?
I'm up.
Oh, you have a comment, okay.
Thank you. I appreciate all the hard work our COVID team has put in and all we're doing and the thinking we're doing, but I'm having a hard time because we're trying to shoot at a moving target and I'm not a very good aim here. I'm telling you that right now. Just all of a sudden have another additional change to the motion that we have for tonight recommended from our team. I just, at this point, can't recommend anything. That's getting way too confusing, jumping around all over the place. And maybe it's time to just stay the course a couple more weeks, so I will not be involved in favor of this.
Any other discussion?
Again, just for clarification, if I could jump in, it would be to approve the updated learning plan that's in the packet, but with the addition of quarantine for E6 in the following way. Students in close contact with an infected person at school do not need to quarantine, but should continue to monitor the symptoms. Students will be quarantined if there is a positive household member. So I just wanted to make sure that was in the latest updated background sheet. So I want to make sure we're on the same page.
Ms. Buck?
And regardless of vaccination status, correct? Like, we're not going to be segregating our unvaccinated with the vaccinated, are we? Thank you.
Nope.
Just trying to clarify that. There's no changes to how we are handling students who are vaccinated versus students who are not, correct?
No, it's a little
Right,
bit different story on the inside though, because they're being treated differently when they're catching COVID. I've noticed many children from my children's friend group that the people who are vaccinated weren't required to quarantine as long. And so things are happening on the inside, just so everybody knows. But I just want to make sure on a legislative standpoint that we're not participating in that sort of segregation.
And Ms. Jorgensen can probably best answer that because she works the most with nurses and students. So my assumption is that we're not differentiating between the vaccinated and unvaccinated. Is that right, Ms. Jorgensen?
We weren't at the elementary level. Obviously, at the high school, we're not, because we're not quarantining anyone. We weren't at the elementary school because elementary up until the end of December were not even able to be fully vaccinated. And so when January turned over and kids started saying, well, I'm fully vaccinated, we were saying, okay, you don't have to quarantine. But knowing that that's kind of given an inequality of, we're not treating everyone the same. We wanted to move to this model like we are at the high school, where we're not differentiating between vaccinated and unvaccinated. We wanted to make sure that the elementaries moved to that model as well.
Okay. I will move on to a vote here with roll call because we have some distance. So beginning with Mr. Deers.
No.
Ms. Rowe? Aye. Ms. Tower?
Aye.
Ms. Tift? Aye. Ms. Buck?
Aye.
And chair votes aye, so that passes 5-1. All right.
Anna, can I say one more thing? I just want to remind everyone that every household is able to order 4 COVID tests from the federal government. The website is just covidtests.gov. It was supposed to start yesterday, but I guess they opened it up today. So just FYI, we'll send a communication out to all staff and families just to remind them.
It's very easy. I did it just a few hours ago. You just put in your name, your address, hit send. It's very simple. All right, thank you. So then we're up to distance learning proposal. Yes?
Yes, there are no changes in the face coverings policy, so this is an attachment, but yeah, distance learning is the next major topic. So principals and I have been discussing the possibility of moving to distance learning, and we considered options as far as having the whole district do distance learning for a couple of weeks, maybe just the high school or just the elementary or grades 5 through 12. We looked at several of those options. In the end, because of staff shortages and the difficulties in finding substitutes, the recommendation from the team is to move to distance learning through February 25th. And again, it's the recommendations being made to balance the need for in-person learning with the need to address substitute shortages. That's why we're doing it. As I mentioned, we're having a hard time finding enough substitutes on every day of the week, but it's especially more difficult on Fridays. And so the thinking here is that if the high school had distance learning just on Fridays, it would free up some subs to help at the elementary schools, so we would not have to rely on the teacher rotation or the assistant principals or principals and others to kind of fill in for the classrooms at Fridays. So Ms. Thompson did bring up some questions about the number of subs that we could free up, and I believe we have 2 permanent subs currently at the high school, but we also anticipate some other non-permanent subs to also help out on Fridays. So we're thinking that we could have 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 subs on many of those Fridays. The reason we suggested February 28th is that we believe that Omicron surge will be subsiding by the end of February. We hope that's the case. And so we thought if we just do this in the stopgap, it could help not only relieve the pressure at the high school finding subs, but also at the elementary, because we'd be moving those substitutes over. Again, that's the recommendation from the principals and myself. The one issue I did not address is the starting time, if the board approves it. The end of the quarter is on January 21st. And so, the recommendation that's listed here is January 21st, which is the last day of the quarter. And there's some teachers who are prepared for that and maybe not other teachers. So a possible variation would be to start on January 28th and then end on February 25th.
Mr. Beers?
Thank you. I appreciate the thought that's going into this and trying to be creative and still not locking us down totally into distance learning. So I also heard the comments of several people that pro and con on this, just like everything else we've gone through this year. And I appreciate all of them because everybody's very passionate for what's good for our kids. And if they weren't, they wouldn't be saying anything. So I realize that, and I thank everybody that's commented on this. So thank you. And listening to this with some logic, and I know I won't please everybody, but I do believe we're talking 3 or 4 days from now to implement the start of this. Or no, it's a week.
Well, it depends on if it was, the proposal is the 21st.
21st, but today's 18th, so 3 days from now. That's not, I know it's out there and people are sort of prepared for it, but I think it's trying to push it in a little bit too quick. I also hear the comments, it's the end of the quarter, and I think it would be much cleaner to implement it in a new semester. And I don't think this is the answer. I'd like more data on why is our Friday sub date? Well, personal leave days are available, and sometimes for a 3-day weekend, people plan it. There's nothing wrong with that. And by shifting it to Friday, will it make a difference and help us on the subs? I don't know, but we won't know until we try it. So I'm in support of this, but I don't want to see it started on the 21st. I'd like to see it start on the 28th. So I will support this proposal because I think we have to be creative and try something. And then we're talking about, is it 4 or 5 weeks total on this? And not to the end of the year. I think we can live with this concept of, and maybe we'll find it works very well, maybe we'll find out it works terrible. So we're only losing 5 Fridays out of it. That is big, but we got to start somewhere. So thank you.
Okay, next up, Ms. Tift. Carson, do you have the numbers on what our sub needs are on days that are not Fridays? And how, I think Ms. Thompson asked something similar to that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is it a huge difference between other days of the week and Friday?
Yeah, Mike Pagel is the principal who's been sort of overseeing, compiling the data. He was not able to join us tonight. But Mr. Palmatier, do you happen to have that at hand as far as sub rates by day? And if not, that's okay. I just thought I would ask.
I do not, but I can look for it.
Okay. While you're looking for it, I've seen the data, in some of our meetings, and it might be a difference of maybe 1 sub, 2 subs, 3 subs that we're short on Fridays. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but right now they're kind of on the edge, in terms of having enough substitutes. If we could move 2 to 4 subs from the high school to the elementary schools on Fridays, it would significantly help. So yeah, I don't have the data in front of me, but I have seen it, and we've had more unfilled absences on Fridays than the other days of the week.
I had one other question too. What kind of feedback have you gotten from staff and teachers about this suggestion?
It's somewhat mixed. There were presumably some elementary teachers who were concerned about fairness. Why are high school teachers providing distance learning, whereas the elementary kids are not? My thinking well, first of all, I can say that every administrator I've talked to wants the kids in school as much as possible. In fact, when I talked to them about a week or 2 ago, the question posed was, should we go to distance learning for everyone for a 2-week period? There were some other schools moving towards that. We were having substitute issues. We were looking at absences for students and staff. So I brought that question to them. Every single building said the same thing. They want the kids in person as much as possible. The problems, though, that we've had are substitutes. And we're thinking about ways to help relieve, well, first to find coverage, but then also to relieve some of the stress for teachers when they're filling in for other teachers during the day. As I said earlier, we looked at all sorts of different variations of it. What it comes down to is that our E6 kids are much more likely to need their parents at home with them during the school day. So it affects not only the kids and the parents, but local businesses, the economy. It really affects the whole community if our E6 students are learning from home on a particular day. It's a huge impact. Whereas grades 7 through 12, I realize it's not preferable. The high school admin would rather have all the kids there 5 days a week, but if it can help relieve some of the stress that our teachers are experiencing, then it will help overall, so they're supportive of that. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I appreciate the admin team thinking outside the box, coming up with another idea other than taking those 2 weeks off, if we can make it work. So thank you for that.
It's sort of a triage. where we try one thing, and if it doesn't work enough, we'll have to consider something else. I will mention one other strategy that we're employing. Ms. Pbis and Ms. French did come up with a plan to encourage more people to substitute teach or serve as substitutes for our paraprofessionals. And this is 3 teachers on call, but if we have people who are willing to sub, make a commitment for every day through February, and I can't remember the starting date, but we are willing to pay $2,200 in bonus money for someone who's willing to do that for teachers, in addition to their daily rate of pay. So that would significantly increase it by yet another almost $100 per day if they make that commitment. For paraprofessional substitutes, it's about half of that. I don't recall the specific name, but that information is being sent through Teachers on Call. So, I mean, we're serious about, doing everything we can to keep our kids in person. Now we just need people to sign up to be subs. For teacher subs, we need somebody with a 4-year degree who can get a short call substitute license. It's a relatively easy process, and we want them in the door as soon as possible. And we're willing to compensate people who are willing to make that commitment every day through February.
Mr. Palmetier, you have that data in front of you about the sub numbers?
I do. Yep, I do. And here's what I have. I have the data since Monday, January 3rd. So I think what I'll do is I'll just read the number of unfilled teaching. I'll give you the date, and then I'll read the number of unfilled teaching positions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So on 1-3, there was, this is between Burnside, Sunnyside, Twin Bluff, and Red Wing High School. On 1-3, there was 1 unfilled teaching position. On 1-4, there were 8 unfilled teaching positions. On 1-5, there were 7 unfilled teaching positions. On 1-6, there were 12 unfilled teaching positions. On 1-7, there were 15 unfilled teaching positions. On 1-10, there were 11 unfilled teaching positions. On 1-11, there were 11 unfilled teaching positions. On 1-12, there were 9 unfilled teaching positions. On 1-13, there were 10 unfilled teaching positions. And on 1-14, there were 13 unfilled teaching positions. We also have, if you're interested, we also have data on para positions as well for those dates.
Part of the problem with the paraprofessional positions is that we don't have enough paras working currently. And so every day we're short when we start. And so if there's an additional absence or two, it's very challenging.
Okay, I have Ms. Buck next for comment question. Oh, you're still muted.
I think I was in the queue.
I think Holly's right.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Tower.
So working in a school right now about the same size as Red Wing High School, we're averaging about the same amount of people out per day, sometimes a little bit higher, and the support staff is comparable. 12 teachers are out, 15 support staff are out, 15 teachers are out, 18 support staff are out. Remarkably, the kids are still coming, right? They're still coming to school. My classrooms today were less than half full, but the kids that were coming to school were not deterred by the fact that their friends weren't there or that the classroom wasn't full. The dilemma that I have as a teacher always is, how do I help the kids that aren't there, that are sick, catch up and stay up And what do I reteach? And how do I reteach? I'm not so sure that going distant 1 day a week is the answer. I know that if I were to go distant on Fridays in my school, it wouldn't be that big of a deal in terms of whether or not the subs would go to the elementary school. I don't see it being that big of an impact. I understand how in your mind it's a rationale. Like, oh, then the subs can go down to the elementary. Subs don't really want to work on Fridays. I don't know why this would be all of a sudden a draw. That, oh yeah, now they're going to come down and work in the elementaries on a Friday. I like the incentivizing that you just talked about, Karsten, and I'd like to see that more with the staff that are here, that the staff that are showing up every day, the staff that are subbing for each other. I know we're paying people like $1 a minute to cover on their prep. Maybe it's $2 a minute to cover on that prep. I'd like to see that go back into the people that are working every single day or 3 days a week when they're not feeling good. That's where I'd like to see that incentivizing going. Yes, we want the community to support. We want volunteers. 1 day a week now, what does that mean after spring break if we have another outbreak and we need those distant days? What does that look like? I think we're moving too fast into this. What if we try? There's no guarantee that this is going to eliminate any issue. And I feel like it's too big of a thing for no guarantee. I don't know if we have all of our TOSAs. And for those of you who don't know, those are teachers on special assignment that work outside of the school. I don't know if we have all of them subbing every day as much as they can. But to my knowledge, that would be at least 4 people in the district office that would come in and sub in schools. What if they were just each assigned a school? You know, we have district people coming in all day long in St. Paul, like they've been in the science class for 2 weeks or they've been in this math class. So those are untapped sources that I think we should really be honing in on, along with the financial incentives. I just don't think it's fair to the teacher that's been there, you know, day in and day out. And then this person gets to come in and sub and they get an extra $200. I think it's great. I don't like it. So I'm not going to be supporting this Friday situation for a myriad of reasons. But the biggest one is that when I'm in school, the kids are there. Kids are coming. And that gives me an opportunity to continue to teach them. And then the kids that I have to reteach or catch up on are less. But if they're at home, chances are good they're not going to come to school. Wi-Fi issues, taking care of siblings, they may take up an extra shift at work. So I'm with the group that says we should be in school right now. That's where my head's at.
And if I could just respond to some of your questions. You're right. There's no guarantee that this will solve the problems. No guarantee. We just recognize that a lot of our teachers are giving up their prep time. And I realize they get paid $1 a minute, but you know, our teachers typically are not looking to give up their prep time, even if they're paid for it. They actually use their prep. You know, if they're correcting papers or doing lessons, those kinds of things. But in the end, Holly or Ms. Tower, you're right. There's no guarantee that it would solve the problem. We do have 4 teachers on special assignment. Well, 3 teachers on special assignment plus our media center specialist. And so they are in the queue now for subbing. And we officially made that move starting today, actually. And so they'll be in the mix as well. In terms of financial incentives, really both of those issues, you know, the $1 a minute and some other financial incentives are part of the negotiations process. And you know, one way that we could do it, and I want to be careful because we're still negotiating, but really to incentivize people, you know, if it's support personnel, you know, custodians, teachers, and others, if they don't use their personal leave, one possibility would be to increase that daily rate of reimbursement for that. So Again, those are all things that we're talking about. We aren't ready to announce anything, but the negotiations team's been considering, some of those things.
Okay, and Ms. Rowe, I have you in the queue.
Thank you. Holly, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm very skeptical that this is an answer. I think it's a Band-Aid. I don't want to repeat history, and what we've learned right now is, I think I read something in our board packet today that we're actually getting finally a handle on some of the behavioral issues that we've seen this year. Well, I asked about a month ago, let's really think about and focus on why we've had such behavioral issues. And it's not a Red Wing issue, it's a countrywide issue. And it's in direct relation to the fact that we've sent kids home unsupervised, not really focused on school. And we did what we had to do. I wouldn't change that. But we have an opportunity to not make that same mistake right now. We're sending 1,200 kids home. That's roughly 1,200 kids home on Fridays. As a parent, I can tell you that we limped along in distance learning. My kids did everything they needed to do, and they had so much free time during the day. And again, that's not cutting down any teacher. We all did the best we could, but it is not the very best education we can give our kids. Just earlier tonight, we talked about high quality education. And if we have an opportunity to keep kids in school by doing some more creative incentivizing, maybe we don't have any, maybe there's some creative ways on Fridays that we can not have specials at the elementary school and do something where, they can fill in, and maybe we have, I don't know, it's above my pay grade. But I like the creative juices that have been flowing. I'd like to continue seeing that. The other consideration that we have to think about on Fridays, if we're closing the high school down, is we have custodians that we're still paying. We have cooks, we have bus drivers, we have kids at home on Fridays that are not getting fed. So then that puts an extra burden on our cooks on Thursday to try and get food sent home or extra packing that we need to do for 5 weeks. So, and we also know that kids need routine, they need consistency, they need predictability, and we're finally getting there. We're finally back to getting them some predictability, some routine, some consistency, and I think this is going to upset the apple cart. And so I want to continue thinking and having these conversations about how we can ease the substitution load. This isn't a new problem. We've been talking about sub shortage all year round since the beginning of September, and I think we need to continue our creative juices flowing to think about this problem's not going anywhere, and so how do we live with a staff shortage? Our healthcare is in that same boat. They're drinking along too, but they're not closing hospitals down or clinics. I think we need to keep thinking about how we can meet the needs of the kids, and we all agree they need to be here. So I cannot support 1 day a week being distance learning.
And if I could, again, respond as far as student discipline, and I bring this up because I think it's an important message, not only for school people, but for the whole community. And like you said, Ms. Rowe, it's truly a national problem as far as student disciplinary issues. There was a huge uptick at the beginning of the year. I'm not sure if that has changed in other parts of the country, as time goes on, but I will say that in Red Wing, our student discipline issues have plummeted, which is a good thing, at least at the high school since October. So September and October, our discipline data was worrisome, but now kids are back in the routine. They are learning how to be in school together again. And I think that would be the primary reason, actually, why the high school administrative team unanimously wants kids in school as much as possible. So the Friday issue is, truly an attempt to address substitute needs that we see not only in the high school, but also in the elementary. If I could choose between keeping everyone in person on Fridays or having all elementary and secondary kids at home on Fridays, I would definitely pick keeping them all in school on Fridays. Because there are all sorts of issues if we start sending elementary kids home on Fridays, for example. So anyway, that's the recommendation, from the admin team, but we'll respect whatever board decides to do, obviously.
Ms. Buck?
I was gonna just have to agree with Holly and Pam. For the sole reason we just agreed on a quarantine policy, we do this and then we actually maybe need it in the future. The with the kids, I can't, because the mental health, I speak on this every time we're in a meeting, the mental health of our youth is beyond. We are in ICU, and to do the and take them, no. And Karsten, in all honesty, I would have to say that behavioral issue kind of pretty much almost went up until break from what I've seen on this side. But you are correct. Everything's starting just to kind of get back to normalcy. And then the pulling, that is so unstable for mentally stable people. So I would have to just say, I'm in agreement with Holly and Pam.
So I don't see any other people in the queue. Is there anyone who wants to make a motion on this topic?
If there's no motion, then we can just move on to either other sections of the COVID plan or just the next item on the agenda.
All right.
I'll stick my neck out. I move we implement this is learning at Red Wing High School on Fridays from January 28th through February 25th.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
You can ask a couple more times, looks like it dies for lack of a second.
All right, anybody want to second this? Okay, that dies for lack of a second, so we will move on. I think that is everything in the COVID-related topics.
Thank
correct?
you for a great discussion. I think it's really helpful, and we will do our best to find as many substitutes every day of the week, including Fridays.
Can I just say one more thing about this? I personally am struggling with this. I just feel like I want to support what the admin team has come up with, because I really appreciate the work that you have done to come up with a creative idea and something that could possibly help with the subbing issues that we have. My hope is that with the new isolation guidelines and quarantine guidelines, perhaps we will not have the issues that we've had in the last, because of the change in the staff isolation. But I would say, if these problems continue to happen, please bring this back to us. It hurts me knowing that our staff is being asked to do so much beyond what they were hired to do initially, and I really appreciate everything that they have done. And so I really want to make sure that this is monitored and that we continue to look at other options and address it as needed in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and we do that on a regular basis. So almost every day, certainly one time a week, we look at that data. We have a standing meeting on Friday, just Yeah, so we'll continue to do that.
Mr. Deere?
Thank you. Yeah, and once again, I appreciate the work the staff went into this, and I just hope all of us as board members, community members, staff, realize that what's being proposed here by 1 day a week of distance learning might be reality in the next few years. It's maybe too early, but we've come a long ways with our technology and our ability to teach. And it gets more and more expensive to educate because of costs, and staffing costs are a large part of it. And in my crystal ball of vision looking out in the future, I can see more and more distance learning being done as part of our own curriculum. This is not the time to do it, obviously, and I respect the board for it, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or two we don't see that as a standard thing to do distance learning certain days with a pre-arranged lesson for the students to do, and maybe only have 4-day weeks and 1 day of this, or alternate weeks or something. That distance learning is coming, whether we want to accept it or not. It's coming. It's going to get refined, so it's going to work. It doesn't work the way we want it to right now, but it's coming. And I hope we all have an open mind to accept that this is where the future is. Thank you.
And thank you, Superintendent Anderson and admin team for the work on this. Just to kind of echo what other people have said, I appreciate the creative thinking and proposing things. So look forward to future options and proposals. Okay, so that brings us to school board reports. And of course, now with our new meeting structure, we don't have as many board committees. There is the negotiations committee, agenda committee, and then the rest of them are sort of our committee of the whole, but still have board liaisons for all of the other various boards and committees throughout the district. Ms. Tower, are you next in the queue? Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say we didn't get our agenda update, our agenda committee update from when you met last week. We didn't get that.
I'm sorry about that, Ms. Tower. That was my responsibility, and I forgot to send it on.
Okay, so can you get it to us this week? Just so we can still be in the loop of what was discussed and move it forward?
Yes. It's all reflected in the agenda tonight, but I can easily send that out.
Great, thank you.
Okay, one thing that I have for the student school board members, I have included as extras in the packet, there are the application for the students to participate in student school board and a little flyer to go along with it. I've communicated with the principal and assistant principals at the high school to kind of come up with some plans for getting that started. But the way that we left it at meeting in December when we talked about this is that we would have a vote to approve kind of this plan moving forward. So I did not want to start anything before we have that in place. And just pulling up the one. Okay, so I would like to make a motion to approve the student school board application and program. I will second that. Any discussion? Okay, Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Ostendorf to approve the student school board application and move forward with that program, seconded by Ms. Tift. And we will do a roll call vote, beginning with Ms. Tower.
Aye.
Ms. Tift? Aye. Ms. Buck?
Aye.
Mr. Dierks?
Aye.
Ms. Rowe? Aye. And Chair votes aye, so that passes 6-0. Great. Any other board report updates?
I'll just say that negotiations is, we're continuing to move along on that. We're meeting with the teachers next week. And we're getting closer.
All right, then we are up to administrative reports.
I'll make this as quick as I can, but I do want to cover some topics. First of all, the First View app is going much better than we had even imagined. And again, that's the app that the students can, or the parents can use to monitor when their kids' buses are close to their home. And so we have over 200 families that have signed up, representing about 250 kids. And it's great on cold days because then parents know when the kids are going to, or the buses are close, and so they can send the kids out at that time. We did a food service meeting where we talked about different mitigation strategies in the cafeteria area. And so I know Mr. Norton has some ideas in terms of expanding how many tables we have, especially starting second semester. He also diligently tried to split the 7th and 8th grade lunch into 2 different lunches, but it just did not work out with the shared teachers with Twin Bluff. So he gave it a shot. But I will say that the 7th and 8th grade lunch, after they're walked through the line and eat, then on half the days, 7th graders go to the gym. On the other days, 8th graders go to the gym. So at least their time in the cafeteria is limited. Mr. Johnson is also getting a quote to determine how much it would cost to move half of the lockers from the locker bay area into one of the pods, because that would free up a lot more space for people to eat. So we're looking at that. I'm not saying we will do it, and I'm not saying it would even happen this spring. You know, I'm not sure how long it would take, but at least we're looking to it. Yeah.
I'm just thinking ahead to grade configurations and what we're going to do in the fall, and I would hate to make a plan to do all of that if we're going to change grade configurations. So I'm sure you're on top of that.
That's a factor that we're looking at, and we don't think it would happen within a month or 6 weeks, and so we think we'll be able to make those grade configuration decisions before we move any lockers.
Okay.
There is a small group, these coming up with our operating referendum planning, kind of timelines or overall plan. And so we are looking at a possible November 2022 operating levy referendum. Ann Robertson is the one kind of overseeing timelines and those kinds of things in conjunction with Lisa Stigurda. And a heavy emphasis will be placed this spring on sharing how we are fulfilling our promises from the last operating levy referendum. I think school board members, staff members, and community members are going to be very impressed with what we've done, even with COVID. And so part of what we need to do is explain what we've done during these difficult circumstances. Ms. Pbis is finalizing the revised budget for this year, and then we'll work on next year's. We're hoping that during the workshop on February 7th, we'll discuss for sure grade configurations and hopefully transportation options. They're both related, obviously. You can see the timelines for the request for proposals for educational planning and legal services. And then finally, the status of our COVID-related federal grants are listed there. We're making some progress in terms of approval. Right now, we don't see any barriers to getting everything approved, but we want to continue giving you regular updates.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All right, then we'll move on to our consent agenda.
It's awesome. I have one question. Are for the grade configurations on February 7th for that workshop,
Has there been a discussion about holding a public meeting at all to get feedback from the public on what we should do with the grade configuration?
We have not. I know we received a request from someone to do that, from a parent. We have not done any planning in that regard, but I'll definitely talk to our chair and vice chair to look at the sequencing of that. My gut feeling as of right now is that we may want to have a workshop session first, so we can at least get some of that out on the table and then present something for the community to get feedback on. If we do it now, we're going to be all over the board. I think the data will show that we have very few options because of how many classrooms we need in each building to appropriately service kids. So we at least narrow that down, and then we're willing to get all the feedback possible.
Thank you. All right. Does anybody have anything they need to pull from the consent agenda? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So
Move
moved.
that.
One at a time.
I'll pull mine out.
Okay, I will say made by Rose, seconded by Dear.
Okay.
Work for you?
Sure.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Ms. Rose, seconded by Mr. Dear. We will do our roll call, beginning with Ms. Tips. Aye. Ms. Buck.
Aye.
Ms. Pierce.
Aye.
Ms. Rose. Aye. Ms. Tower.
Aye.
And chair votes aye, so that passes 6-0.
Then if I could add that there are some long-term people who are retiring, including Joe Berghammer, Kristen Grove, Scott Bender, Steve Clark, and of course, Principal Chris Palmatier. So we want to acknowledge their great work here and thank them for their service to the school district.
And I almost voted no because of that, number 4. I don't want to say goodbye to those folks. Thank you. There's a lot of years of service behind those 5 people. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Some of them have been teachers, certainly principal with my kids. So thank you for your dedication to our district. You will be missed.
Indeed, thank you all very much. Okay, then we are on to donations and grants.
I'd like to thank 3 entities for their donations. First of all, Red Wing Chevrolet, $1,000 for the Red Wing High School food shelf. The kindergarten classes we discussed earlier, a donation of $754.21. Also the food shelf that represents work that they've done for others. And then also Rhonda McKim for her donation of a percussion kit.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the attached resolution accepting donations and grants. I will make that motion. The resolution. Thanks. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
All right, we have a motion to approve the attached resolution accepting donations and grants by Ms. Tipp, second by Ms. Rowe, and we'll do a roll call beginning with Ms. Buck.
Aye.
Mr. Dirks?
Aye.
Ms. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Tower?
Aye.
Ms. Tipp? Aye. Chair votes aye. So that passes 6-0, and thank you all very much for your contributions. We are going to, we already talked about skipping over the committee assignments, and then we are up to a Pbis update with Ms. Deepa.
Good evening, everybody. I just got to get my presentation shared and I'm going to get started.
Just a reminder as she's getting ready that her position is thanks to the voters who approved several positions, including help with social emotional learning, instructional coaching. And so because of that operating levy, Ms. Seafelt is here. And of course, so many others are also helping to fulfill our educational plan, but we're excited to have you here.
So this was shared earlier in August. This is our goals for year 3 in our educational plan for Pbis. Even with all of our challenges this year, I have to say I am really proud of our district of where we move forward in our Pbis and our skills, our focus on tier 1 and our students. Carson had mentioned data earlier. I have, I'll go through briefly because you've seen it. I do have our measures of data for our buildings through December because January is not complete. When I look at it, I don't see any surprises. I see exactly what I would expect for a trend for the year, and we're now in our trend line down. So we've gone go through those right there. So everything's trending down. This is just one small snapshot of data that we look at as a Pbis team at the building levels and at the admin level. This is also, when you look at that, it is our baseline data is what we're looking at it this year, because we've never had the grade configuration that we have right now. So we don't have anything really to compare it to because we've never looked exactly how we've looked right now. Our big focus is our tier 1. So this is our first year doing this system. I've had a lot of great feedback. It also really works with COVID in a way that I'm not asking for more time from teachers when I'm doing instructional coaching. I don't want to have to be like, let's set up an hour-long meeting. I want them to have all the time they can, but still get reflective feedback on practices. So we do a monthly self-assessment K-12 right now, and that is on our tier 1 focus for the month. We also do then like a weekly bite-sized Pbis, so small bits of professional development in staff newsletters every week related to that tier 1 focus. For K-6, we do a monthly walkthrough related to the tier 1 focus. They get feedback digitally. We'll communicate back and forth through comments. If they need me to come in for something else, we come in, but it's a way to provide that feedback that we all need in our practices in a way that works with our systems that we have right now. So that just kind of goes over what we focus on each month. You'll notice that after February is not listed, I'm going to be doing a survey of our teachers of what they want most, because we will have covered the 6 practices. So what do we want to come back on? What do you want more information on? What do you want me to be looking for when I am doing those walkthroughs of the classrooms? One really super exciting thing is I track behavior-specific praise. So the difference is general praise is just a good job. It doesn't actually give you the feedback of what did you do well. Behavior-specific praise tells you what you did well and why. There's research tied to that you can improve the behavior in a classroom by 80% just by pointing out to kids what they do well. That's something I told teachers I would track this year, because as we all know when we teach, there is no way to track your rate of general praise or behavior-specific praise when you teach. You need someone to be able to observe that. K-6, we were 27% use of behavior-specific praise in October. Our December was 86%. That is amazing growth. I can tell you, I see so much amazing things when I'm in all of our classrooms. We celebrate this at the end of every month. I keep track of what I call like our walkthrough celebrations. I send that out to admin and the teachers at every month. Also, you get ideas that way too, because you often aren't in other people's rooms to be like, oh, they did this or they tried that. But I probably cannot say enough how many fantastic things that I've seen our teachers this year. Just amazing. And that's just my really brief overview of this year. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you for presenting this. Ms. Tower.
Thank you, Emily. I like the positive words. So I'm going to say, nice job, Emily, on being very specific about the data you're collecting and the skills you're teaching and bringing that to us. Now, we talked about at the beginning of the year how you were getting information to subs in terms of our Pbis system. What have you been doing that you feel has been effective?
For subs, we are still working on one of our projects is like working on onboarding. I will say right now I'm the only Pbis for K-12. Thanks to you, we are going to be adding that 7-12 back in so we can get to all of those plans and goals that we have. For subs, I will be honest, we're working on onboarding with that. I will say for EAs, it's definitely increased. We met with them during workshop week. I am spending a couple of hours with EAs on their full day of training next week on more Pbis stuff. They had requested that. We're going to go over some training on the continuum of responses to inappropriate behavior. So I feel really good about our EAs. I will tell you, we can still grow on how we onboard our subs into our district.
I don't think you're far apart from other people trying to onboard subs. I do know that you can put things, embed things into teachers on call, you know, around lesson plans and things like that. But I think it would be too difficult for us to have one standard statement because we don't control when a teacher puts in.
No, and really what we could do that would be simple for now, like the stopgap as we create our onboarding system. And we have ideas just even beyond subs for some onboarding things for a project this summer, even a one-page snapshot of here's our philosophy of Pbis for Red Wing. I think even double-sided. And it's one of those things, I'm thinking of it right now, and just get that in all of our subfolders.
Yeah, I mean, just the little things help, because I know when people come in, they're like, okay, where do I begin? Kids' names, yes. Attendance, yes. What am I teaching? And then what happens if? And the if always happens.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sauer.
Thank you. What kind of feedback have you heard from teachers?
I've had really great feedback from as simple as they stop in the hallway and they're like, I just love that. I have some that we do comment back and forth. It's not required. I don't want to require anything this year. I also meet longer, like with our new teachers. They'll reach out with me. I met with some during like our PDD yesterday, or I meet with them after school. So I do longer times with teachers too. But I've heard really great things from walkthroughs, or just they didn't know. Like, oh, I didn't know that was my behavior specific rate of praise. Or when I send it, I'm like, you average 1 a minute. That is awesome. That is higher than our 4-to-1. So I've heard really, really great things from it this year. And it was just what we came up with that would work this year to get to our 70 gen ed teachers in K6.
This is really great. And I have a question. Is there a lot, I mean, I would like to, is there a class you're teaching? Can I join? You know, I would like to kind of see, because I still am the behavioral group in school. So it'd be really nice to see how far this has come since my day. And then also, like, is there anything on trauma with relation to this? Because as a foster care parent, I have so many classes I have to keep up with in order to maintain my license and such. So there's a lot of trainings that go with that. And so a majority of the training is just the trauma training. So I just want to know, is there like any trauma specific things addressed in this?
There is, it's embedded. So when you look at the Tier 1 practices, I got a lot of our resources from Midwest Pbis Network. It'll have the trauma lens as why you do this practice through trauma. When it comes to the class and education, when we add in that 712, which we are interviewing next week, we're really excited. Then one of the big goals, Nikki, I don't know if you remember this, was to establish that community Pbis committee. And right now, we haven't had time to devote to that. And part of that is community education, parent education, but having them part of the process. And then like lofty goal dream, you go into all of our spaces in our community, like you go to the Y, and they have our Winger Pride, be safe, be kind, be responsible. Here's what it looks like. So our kids go into these community spaces and they see the same expectations, those same positive intents that we have in school in the community. So that's like my lofty goal right there.
Thank you. I really appreciate that and all the work that has gone into this. This is great. You know, the thing was, it's like when I was growing up, everybody's like pointing fingers, you know, pointing a finger at me. Well, they had how many pointing back at them. It's not just a behavioral with the special education. It's almost like this should be offered to everybody, because we all have to learn how to navigate our own spirit. So ADHDers, well, we're the perfect teachers for all of you, because we were thrown through this first.
Thank you.
All right. We are up to our Red Wing High School Program of Studies. So we have Mr. Norton, our interim high school principal, here to talk with us.
You can come on up here, Mr. Norton. I'm not sure if everyone has met Mr. Norton in person. I'll tell you what, he was a great find when we chose him for the center principal position. We're excited to have Mr. Eminich back in March, but I'll tell you what, we're going to miss Mr. Norton because he's done outstanding work. So just to give you a brief background, Mr. Eminich, of course, is the one responsible for the program of studies for the high school. He works closely with Ms. Whitcomb on those kinds of issues. Mr. Eminich had one of the most productive 3 or 4 month periods, maybe 6 months, that I've ever seen any administrator accomplish this past year as he was getting ready before his leave. However, he wasn't able to do everything. It would be impossible to do everything. And so one of the things that Mr. Norton jumped in the middle of was the program of studies, trying to tie everything together as far as the different kind of classes, some other changes in expectations. He's done a very nice job. And so, Mr. Norton, do you mind just kind of going over some of the highlights of the program of studies?
One of the major things that Mr. Nemenich was working on was making sure that there was opportunities for all students within the program of studies to participate in any course that they wanted to be able to participate. It was sort of a vision of his to be able to say that regardless of where you were or the background that you come from, you had an opportunity to be able to go and excel. And it's just a philosophy of his. I was lucky enough to be able to sit down on a couple of meetings where he discussed that with some of the staff, and it is a passion. And I'm sure it's a passion of the boards as we look at students that come from all kinds of backgrounds to have those similar opportunities to anybody that has that. So working on the program of studies, we're in the sort of the steps of making sure that that happens. That if you are in a class that is teaching at the standard, and you want to accelerate and you want to go faster and you have the opportunity to be able to do that, the program of studies allows for that opportunity, allows for that to happen if you would like to go in that particular direction, and the barriers are down. And that's kind of what we're working on through that. And it's an ongoing process. We've begun that process, conversations. I've had several meetings with math department members, the entire math department at the high school level, and 7-12. And some people from the language arts department as well. So based off of those conversations, I've got a deeper understanding of where they are and the scope and sequence of all of the curriculum, and now how we can blend those two things together. Students being able to achieve at the level that they want to be able to achieve, and still look when they get into the college level for the college to be able to say, you have done what we want you to be able to do, and at the same time allowing equitable access to those tracks for all students to be able to get in there. So that's the marriage that we're kind of looking for. And that's George's sort of philosophy or idea, and bringing that to the board at this particular point. And I know it's nothing new to you, but that's my work right now, and the work of the department and the work of Jess to be able to make that happen. Now begins sort of that work so that we're not in this place again next year. The program of studies itself it will be a work in progress. We need to sort of lay it out on the table and say, what does it look like right now, and what do we want? What's the vision for that? What's the vision of Red Wing as far as an institution that allows access for all students to be able to accelerate? And we can make that happen, and you'll see it as it progresses as a program of study, as it comes back to each year. You'll note several things within that program. So that's basically the science and social studies portion of it. Language arts and math department, I'm sorry.
In other words, there have been discussions about how to change honors course offerings, but the program of studies does include those classes. The parts that have changed would be the prerequisites, so that we are not keeping barriers up for access to those classes. But the classes are still there. People can sign up for honors classes. So that was sort of the major discussion topic here over the last few weeks.
Great. The prerequisites are, throughout the program of study, need to be looked at if we're going to continue on this trajectory. If we're going to keep on going in this particular, that's what I meant by laying it out on the table. They are in there. The prerequisites have been removed, and the departments were all in favor of that. It's something that we needed to look at, and now we are looking at them. But they are included in the program of study.
Ms. Tower has anything done?
Oh, Ms. Tower.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Norton, for explaining that and trying to get up to speed as quick as you can on a very heavy topic. So students in St. Paul walked out today because the students of color feel that there has not been equal access to accelerated classes throughout the history of accelerated classes in the city of St. Paul. And they're not wrong. When I was an 8th grader at Twin Bluff Junior High, they dropped me out of advanced math, and they called my mom and told her that they needed an equal number of boys to girls. And because I was having a little bit of a difficulty in the math class, I was the girl they were dropping in lieu of a boy. Now, guaranteed that was a white boy that was added to the class. So yes, that happened in Red Wing Public Schools. And as a child, I'm thinking, oh, thank God I don't have to do hard math anymore. And that wasn't the issue. The issue was access and opportunity, which I was deprived of. Now, when we look at what Red Wing Public Schools is trying to do, it causes all kinds of fear. What if my child doesn't get? How will my child be able to get? It looks at the GPA. It looks at, how does this measure out when kids have a higher point when they're taking accelerated class, when it goes into, colleges and universities. My hope is that colleges and universities are broadening it the way that they're accepting students into the school. I see this as a very beginning stage of what should have happened a long time ago. And if it has to take a dip on what we need to do in order to get back to a level playing field, okay. And parents that have students in accelerated classes, be aware. You may have to support your child in a different capacity. That's just the nature of it, because kids who have been held back for a variety of reasons, not academically, but a variety of reasons, have had to do their own work on the outside also to get to that playing field. So I'm in full support of the program of study shifting, of teachers taking a look at kids for who they are, not necessarily what they've always been told that they're in the track to do. So kudos to George, kudos to you, Frank, kudos to the departments in the high school for hashing it out. I know this doesn't make people happy. My mom wasn't happy in 1988 when they pulled me. Lots of unhappiness comes, but hopefully, and I think there will be a guarantee that this will be better in the end.
Ms. Bob?
As I was looking at this, I noticed the groups and stuff, the different extracurricular activities. Let me just go back up to where I was looking at. Oh yeah, right here. The school would like all students to participate in at least one activity during the year. Following is the list of activities and clubs offered at Red Wing High School, subject to change. And, then we come upon NASA, Native American Student Association, which obviously you have to be Native American to join that. But this is the really great thing. I would assume that, the appropriate channels of talking with Phil and Mitch and everything have been honored and fulfilled. But this is an awesome opportunity to get our students to really look at our culture and our people in a different lens than what they've normally have been. Because like I said, 23 years ago, when I was through the district, it was separation. You know, this, it was exclusion. This looks more like inclusion to me. You know, if you don't understand, how do you learn something you don't understand? By being involved in it. And this creates a great opportunity. This speaks as a district that we want all of our students to be inclusive. Let's open these gates up. So I give you a round of applause, pat on the back, a high five for including in this and that.
Ms. Ossendorf, if I could just add a quick thing, and kind of echoing what Ms. Tower said. I've heard from every high school administrator, Ms. Whitcomb, all of us are on the same page in terms of supporting our equity-related work towards providing equitable access to all of our courses in the high school. It will take time, you know, to really look at the issues, to look at different plans, but we want to do the right thing for all kids. And the first step this time was to remove those prerequisites so that, you know, we aren't relying on teacher invitations or standardized test scores or some barrier like that. We're trying to open it up for everyone. But we have a lot of work to do, not just the high school, it's the elementaries, as far as when we start advancing kids and providing those enrichment activities. We're going to focus on it over the next several months, and so there'll be additional changes as we move forward.
Could I just ask that maybe we put that on as a workshop topic so that we can understand a little bit more about the philosophy behind this and maybe some data that supports it, so that we can all be on the same page with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, examples, for example, and how it benefits everyone. You know, yes, it probably isn't just one workshop, it's probably multiple workshops. Mm-hmm.
Or even if you could give us some things to read or explore on our own, I think that would be helpful as well. Mr. Dirks?
Yeah, when was this posted in our board packet?
Oh, I know I was up in the MSBA convention when, I think it was Thursday, Ms. Rowe, when we talked about it at dinner.
Yeah, probably.
So I'm guessing it was Thursday. I was gone at the time, but we did have an update that was just posted with some minor adjustments to it. So, and I think that was posted today.
So I missed it when I looked earlier last week. I thought it was on Thursday. And I'm looking at the dates here. It's been updated here yesterday. And I don't like surprises at a meeting. I think it's a great program, but I haven't had a chance to review everything, and I just feel it's wrong to be putting stuff out without ample time for something this size. So I'd rather be voting no on it. And it's not about the program, it's about the timing if it goes out today.
Point well taken.
The whole idea was to have the agenda ready on Wednesday when it's a Monday meeting, by Thursday the other, and stuff isn't there unless the emergency should table on it the next time, and that's what I believe. So, thank you.
If I could, I would make the motion to approve the Redmond High School Program of Studies for 22-23 as presented. Okay, is there a second?
Nikki Buck.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, I will begin our roll call with Ms. Buck. Sorry. There is a motion on the table to approve the Redmond High School Program of Studies for 22-23 as presented. Motion made by Ms. Tim, seconded by Ms. Buck. Now I will begin the roll call with Ms. Buck.
Aye.
Mr. Dirks?
No.
Ms. Rowe? Aye. Ms. Tower?
Aye.
Ms. Tift? Aye. And chair votes aye, so that passes. 5-1. All right. Also just wanted to thank Mr. Wendland for compiling the changes made. I found that to be very helpful.
Yeah, agreed.
Especially when there's a lot of information to look through.
Agreed.
Okay, we are up to our school calendar. Present proposal for 22-23. So looks like Jen Grove, are you on our call?
I'm not sure if she received an invite to the meeting.
Okay.
But I can present the calendar. But I do want to thank Ms. Grove for her work leading the calendar committee this year. It's one of the things that has been kind of transferred to one of the principals. I think it works really well because they have such a close association with teachers and can get that immediate feedback. And she did a great job. So you can see the calendar that was recommended by the calendar committee. It does include 171 student days in the calendar. You can see the different grade areas or professional development days. We also have parent-teacher conference days as well. And it represents the committee, which includes school board member, 1 or 2 school board members, principal representative, several teachers, and then when possible, there is also a member of the support personnel union who's invited to come to the meetings, but the schedule of meetings doesn't work out very well for her. So again, this is the recommendation for the 22-23 school calendar.
As a member of that committee, I can just attest to the fact that there's a lot that goes into the calendar. I always laugh every single time I'm at a meeting because there's so many details that, you know, I wouldn't even pick up on in terms of professional development and student contact hours and all sorts of things. So I appreciate the work of Ms. Grove and the rest of the committee that really looked at all of those fine details. And they have my full endorsement on this calendar.
Ms. Tower?
I'm going to concur with Pam. There's a tremendous amount of detail that goes into this calendar. And it, like Jim would say, and he's not there tonight, some people will be happy and some people won't be happy. And that's kind of how it goes with these big decisions. I really like that we've been able to be a little bit flexible with some of the calendar things in the last month because of COVID. And as we move forward into the end of this year and then looking into next year, I hope we can continue to be flexible if things come up around staff development days or, you know, whatever it may be. But I really appreciate everybody's hard work on this. So I'm in favor of this calendar.
What is the number of buffer days that we have in this calendar for snow days or other closures that may occur?
The minimum number of student days is 165. So we can do 5 of our days as e-learning days or what we call flex days. And so the first 5 days or first 5 e-learning days, you know, can represent like there's inclement weather. And then after that, we have the equivalent of 6 days to give.
Okay.
If I could add one thing, Ms. Grove already has the 23-24 rough draft in the calendar. And so our thinking, and you're okay with it, is that we want to approve that this spring. So parents have the calendar a year in advance so they can plan their trips over Christmas and spring break and kind of plan everything else in their lives for that year. So it's all thanks to Ms. Grove and the work that she's doing.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the school calendar as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Who said that? Sorry. Okay, thank you. I wasn't watching your mouth move. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the school calendar for 22-23 by Ms. Rose, second by Ms. Tower. Is there any more discussion? All right, we will begin our roll call with Mr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Rowe? Aye. Ms. Howard?
Aye.
Ms. Tift? Aye. Ms. Buck?
Aye.
And chair votes aye, so that passes 6-0. Thank you all for all of your work on that, who were involved. Okay, so upcoming meetings and future topics. I have a list here. So for February 7th, our workshop, we will talk about grade configuration and transportation. We will also be looking at our financials as the committee of the whole. We should have the financials then for December. I know that sounds a little weird, but just they need that time to kind of give that, get all of that information prepared. Also on my list, I have connecting with legislators, potentially a forum for school and grade level configuration. Are there any others that I am missing? I know that there were some from previous, like from last year, that did not make it in as workshops. So I was trying to see if we have a list of those.
Yeah, that's listed in the administrative reports.
Yep, which is, I got a big old packet here, so. Okay, there we go. Board self-evaluation, so we need to do that sooner than later. Open meeting law, including serial meetings, fast bridge assessments, special education recovery services, and that's tentative for March 7th, and then, as I said, February transportation and grade configurations. Okay. So, with that, unless anyone has anything else, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, Holly, Ms. Tower. I'll second. All right, so a motion to adjourn by Ms. Tower, second by Ms. Tift. Begin our roll call with Ms. Rowe. Aye. Ms. Tower?
Yes.
Ms. Tift? Aye. And then Ms. Buck?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so we are adjourned at 7:50.